Even though you were not thinking about it, Overwatch ended up being a gigantic success. So, did you start thinking about in this framework of crawl, walk, run about the walk, the PvE piece?
Yes. So the PvE piece was what Overwatch 2 was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if people know this or not, but we started working on Overwatch 2 in 2015. So Overwatch 1 didn't ship until 2016. So before Overwatch, and it wasn't like work in earnest. It was like pitching the game. Um, I remember I spent a lot of time. It was myself, Chris Metzen, and Michael Chu, sort of brainstorming a framework for what like a campaign could look like. And we had this idea of like a cooperative PvE shooter. And we actually pitched it to the team before we launched because we were trying to put a bunch of runway in front of us that worked against us. And it's one of my biggest mistakes I've made as a creative leader in my career was Overwatch 2. There were 2 points of failure for me. The first was I had people on the game team who didn't like PvP or competitive shooters, and they really loved the Overwatch universe and wanted to play these characters and heroes, but they wanted to kind of do it on their own terms in like a PvE setting. So even though Overwatch is this like runaway success and everybody's talking about it, they felt like they couldn't really engage with it. And so like people on the dev team are like, okay, thank God we, shipped that PvP thing.
Mm-hmm.
When do we start work on this other thing? So that came from a genuine place of excitement. And then the other point of pressure was from the executive team. And this was both the Blizzard and more so the Activision executive teams. And they started really putting the heat on, well, you said Overwatch 2 was going to be out in 2019. And they're referring back to these slides that were just crazy dates. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was, you never want to put a PowerPoint deck in front of a corporate executive. Like you might as well etch it in stone and come down from the mountain on it.
So you just threw some dates because the layout looked good.
Yeah, this is just all bullshit. This is just in the same way we put like the tablet, we just put
Yeah.
Overwatch, like put Tracer on a tablet and say we have a mobile strategy. So the executives started getting really angry at us that Overwatch 2 was slipping. And so when Overwatch 1 took off, I remember very early, we were in like May of 2016. And that year, the Olympics were going to be in Rio, I think. And I always like to pay respects to like when a big event is happening. I'm like, hey, we should do like an event for the Olympics. You can't call it the Olympics or else they sue you. So you just, even though you're advertising for them to a bunch of kids who want to play video games and not watch the Olympics. But we also had like these two developers, Mike Heiberg and Dave Adams, like worked on this quirky, like they made soccer in Overwatch. We called it Lucio Ball. Like they
Mm-hmm.
made a map and they made these mechanics. We're like, yeah, let's do an event called the Summer Games.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a live patch that's the Summer Games. It's extremely successful. And then after that, we're like, yeah, let's do Halloween's coming up. Let's do a Halloween event. How cool will that be? And our fans just loved these events, but there were two groups that were struggling with it. One was that group I told you on the dev team who was like, oh my God, you guys are overscoping the patches. Why are we doing this Halloween event? We should start work on Overwatch 2. We shouldn't be this focused on the live game, which was fucking nuts. Like that was just crazy. There's this phrase of catch the wave, ride the wave. most games fall off the back of the wave. They don't catch the wave. No one plays it or plays it for 2 weeks. If you're lucky enough to have caught the wave,
Mhm.
ride it till the end.
Mhm.
And my instincts at that point were like, let's just keep how many more of these live events can we do?
So yeah, so now there's this wave and the live game and events, but the pressure on creating Overwatch 2 was building.
Yeah, we had a coalition on the team that was really wanted Overwatch 2 built instead of the live events, and then the executive pressure became monumental. And what would have been correct was to do more world events, like keep it going. But the major derail was Overwatch League. And we really the weirdest part about Overwatch League is I believe in it. You know, I helped pitch it along with some other people. We thought it was like the future of esports and doing regional based teams, ensuring minimum player salaries and player protections. Like there was a lot of very good about Overwatch League.
And there'd be teams associated with particular cities, and it'd be
Yes.
international, it'd be real competition. So the dream, the ambition was really huge there.
Yeah, the teams part of the dream was more of like regional based player protection, try to make esports more of a first class citizen because there were all these stories about like shady teams, you know, screwing their players over. Where it got away from us was there was a lot of excitement about Overwatch League, like too much so, and then it got over marketed to the people buying the teams. Um, they went on this road show where they had a deck basically, and like you can put anything in a deck and sell anything. And they were pretty much selling the Brooklyn Bridge that Overwatch League was going to be more popular than the NFL.
Mhm.
And we got a bunch of billionaire investors in these teams. And when 2018 started, like for example, the day I got back, they said we signed this huge deal with Twitch for streaming of Overwatch League, like a media rights deal. And that means that here's all these commitments we made for Overwatch League of like in-game stuff that had to exist. Like a lot of it was integration with Twitch and camera control and that kind of stuff. The other part of it was a bunch of skins and you know, uniforms for all the teams, which was not just getting the art in the game, but there was huge technical challenges to like how all that worked and was efficient and hit the right, you know, memory footprint and all of that kind of stuff. And so all of your plans at that point kind of go out the window. Like you're not going to work on new world events. You're not really even focused on Overwatch 2. You're just kind of treading water.
Mhm.
There was a lot of talk of like, oh God, you know, the deal, like the deal didn't go well and we've got to do make goods to make the deal better for them. I'm like, just give them some money back, you know? Like if the deal isn't what people wanted, like putting it on us, the Overwatch team to like support this beast.
Yeah.
And it was a great idea that the wrong instincts and sort of I don't know how to phrase this in a way that's not damning, but there was too much focus on let's make lots of money really fast. And a lot of people got dragged into it. And while Overwatch League was great for Overwatch in terms of the players that it brought in, like, and the Overwatch League players, they were awesome. I love them. The Overwatch League staff at Blizzard, some of the nicest, most motivated, great creative
Mhm.
people. Like all of these organizations got built and they were all great, but it was a house of cards waiting to fall.
And became more about the money versus the quality of the experience of the different teams playing together and actually building this ecosystem of esports.
The financial reality kicked in where these teams now we didn't just have executives at Activision and Blizzard who cared about the bottom line of Overwatch. We had all these people who basically invested in the game, and then they started to express their opinions. Originally, the business model was going to be that they were going to do in-person events, and there's going to be big ticket sales and then merch, and all of that. And I think really quickly everybody learned, like, yeah, we can't do in-game events when you have a London team and a Shanghai team, and like, how does this work? So that fell apart super quickly. The merch was good, but it wasn't going to be making NFL level money,
Mm-hmm.
whatever insanity anybody thought that was going to be. So everybody quickly defaulted back to, hey, didn't Overwatch make like $500 million just in the live game last year? What can we sell and what can you give us? That pressure comes onto the team. And then the pressure to ship Overwatch 2 and all care and love that we had for like the live game and the live let's just make events and new heroes and new maps. We're losing all these resources. And it got to the point, my exit at Blizzard, I believed in Overwatch too. I think we could have made a great I have a lot of hindsight of like how I would have designed that game differently with what I know now versus what ultimately we didn't ship. And there's Overwatch 2 is out now, but it's not the Overwatch 2 that we planned and announced.
So when you're referring to Overwatch 2 in this conversation, you're referring to the PvE version.
The PvE version.
Which, by the way, I would have loved to play. I'm one of the people that were... Overwatch is great, but the PvP... But I would have loved to play the PvE version.
I think everybody would have loved to have played it. And there's a misconception online that all I cared about was PvE and I didn't care about PvP. All of the Overwatch 2 PvP maps were something that I said to the team over and over. We have a PvP audience. If we get anything right, it has to be the PvP. We would be lucky to welcome these PvE players, but that's not guaranteed. So it was never a PvE only focus.
It's just almost expanding it to also the E.
And what eventually broke me was it used to be like in 2016 and 2017, I felt very in control of the Overwatch team and the direction of the game as a game director, working with Ray Gresko as the production director. It felt like we were running Overwatch and we were very, very successful and doing a good job. And I think the fans were happy. And then as we transitioned, Overwatch League was the best intention. My parents always say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That was the Overwatch League, and it ended up being an albatross. And then Overwatch 2 was the same thing. And what it boiled down for me, like what sort of ultimately broke me in my Blizzard career, was I got called in the CFO's office, and he sits me down and he says, he gives me a date, which at the time was 2020 and was going to slip to 2021, but at the time it was 2020. And he said, Overwatch has to make in 2020. And then every year after that, it needs a recurring revenue. And then he says to me, if it doesn't do dollars, we're going to lay off 1,000 people, and that's going to be on you. And that was just the biggest fuck you moment I had in my career. It felt surreal to be in that condition. And as somebody who's worked on a lot of games, made a lot of games, you get in these meetings where they're like, Fortnite has 1,400 people working on it. If you just hire 1,400 people and make it free to play, we'll make that money, right? And that was, I had believed I would never work anyplace but Blizzard. I loved it. It was a part of who I was, and I felt I was a part of it, and I literally thought I would retire from the place. I never thought the day would come, and, that was it. I was like, it's we're done here." Luckily for Blizzard, that CFO is no longer there.
I mean, Blizzard is one of the greatest companies in the history of Earth. They've created so many incredible video games. It's so difficult to create so many hits, and they were done not by chasing money. They're done by small, incredible teams, the hodgepodge that you describe, taking big risks and falling in love with the thing they do, and then just chasing it, working extremely hard. And just because you figured out a way how to make a lot of money doesn't mean it's not at the core this incredible creative journey that's incredibly difficult to pull off. And just because you got a bunch of really smart creative people who have somehow figured out how to pull it off multiple times in a row doesn't mean you can just treat it like a machine. Every single time, it's this beautiful journey of a hodgepodge of weirdos working together, and weirdos have to run that thing. If you ever have a chance to create something special, you have to have weirdos at the helm. And at the degree to which you don't have weirdos at the helm, creative minds at the helm, and you're a business person at the helm, get out of their way, right? You cannot have the meetings like you're describing. And I don't just speak about this particular company. It's just the entire industry. There's so much joy to be had if we keep creating great games. And I just hope we get to see those great games.
I think there's a message to creative people out there and people who make stuff. We're generally we're so focused on the love of the craft that we get lost in it and we love doing it. Um, and we're not cutthroat and we don't have that kind of ambition. We have a different kind of ambition. But there's this whole world, especially as soon as you're lucky enough to have success, that are very cutthroat and very ambitious. And for whatever reason, we keep giving ourselves to them. And we need to stop giving ourselves. World of Warcraft, when we made it, there was no CFO at Blizzard. You don't need a CFO to make World of Warcraft. You need artists, engineers, designers, producers, and an audio team.
You don't need to bring in, just because you're making a lot of money, it doesn't mean you need to now start adulting by bringing in a CFO. You can
Yeah.
figure it out.
And there are great finance guys. Like, I've worked with finance guys who get it and get out of the way and respect, and they're gamers and they sort of understand. But like, I I wish developers would understand their own value more and stop handing the golden goose to people who don't deserve it.
How painful was it to say goodbye?
It broke me. I think after you've been at a place like Blizzard, which I love Blizzard to this day. I have nothing but warm, fond memories. I mean, there's those moments where you're like, I wish that hadn't happened. But on the whole, that place is mecca for game development. And everything I have is due to Blizzard. They provided for me and my family, made me the person I am. So separating from Blizzard was one of the most painful things. And I was very sad when I resigned. And I didn't realize how broken I was until recently, like the morning grieving I had gone through of like, I think I'm a little fucked in the head for not being there how could I give that up? How could I not be there anymore? It was really, really painful, leaving.